Mr. Richard, Liam turned back, his voice cold and sharp. You forged this very carefully, but you forgot one basic anatomical detail. In 2004, I was left-handed. He raised the document high. The hook of this signature slants to the right. Night of July 4th, 2004, United States Independence Day. The Costa Estate, the Hamptons, New York. The night sky over the Hamptons coastline exploded with brilliant fireworks in red, white, and blue. The booming blasts echoed through the air, blending with loud jazz music and the clinking of champagne glasses. All of America was celebrating freedom, and so was Richard Dune. Inside the vast, oak-paneled study of the Costa Estate, Richard Dune, a 45-year-old man with meticulously slicked-back hair, stood by the floor-to-ceiling window. His hand gently swirled a glass of 30-year-old scotch, his arrogant gaze fixed on the extravagant garden party below. It had been exactly 1 week since Maria Costa, his wife, and the true owner of this immense fortune, had breathed her last. The grave had not yet settled, but the celebratory wine had already been uncorked. To Richard, this was not an Independence Day party. This was a coronation. The heavy wooden door behind him burst open with a loud bang. Liam Costa stepped inside. The 18-year-old was thin, his face hollow from long nights spent by his mother's hospital bed, yet his eyes burned with a fierce, indescribable rage. He was still dressed in black mourning clothes, completely out of place amid the festive atmosphere. "What the hell are you doing?" Liam's voice trembled as he struggled to contain his fury. "My mother hasn't even been dead for 7 days." Richard turned around, the familiar half-smile never leaving his face. He took a sip of his drink and spoke calmly. "Liam, my boy, don't ruin the mood. Your mother would want us to keep living, to be joyful and happy. That's the best way to honor her." "Don't say her name with that filthy mouth of yours." Liam stepped forward and slammed his hand onto the desk. "Where's the will? I want to see my mother's will right now. She said she left a copy in the safe." Richard let out a sharp laugh. He set the glass down, slowly opened a drawer, pulled out a thin legal document, and tossed it onto the polished desk. It slid across the surface and stopped in front of Liam. "Read it, you little bastard." Liam grabbed the paper. The words danced before his eyes. Full control over the assets, shares, and trust funds. Everything had been transferred to Richard Dune as the sole trustee. "That's impossible," Liam muttered. "My mother would never hand everything over to a devil." "She loved me, Liam, or at least she trusted me more than she trusted a snot-nosed kid like you." Richard stepped closer, leaning in until his face was inches from Liam's, the stench of alcohol heavy on his breath. "And you know what? Today is your 18th birthday. Happy birthday." He paused, his eyes turning cold and merciless. "Under New York state law, you're an adult now. I no longer have any legal obligation to support you. This house, from this moment on, is mine." Richard pressed a button on his desk. 10 seconds later, 2 large security guards in black suits rushed into the room. "Throw him out," Richard ordered, his voice as cold as if he were ordering trash to be taken away. "Right now. Don't let him take anything except the clothes on his back." "You can't touch me!" Liam shouted as the 2 guards lunged forward and wrenched his arms behind his back. A sharp pain shot straight to his head. A dry, cracking sound echoed from his left arm, but the music and fireworks outside drowned everything out. They dragged him through the long, velvet-carpeted corridors, through the grand main hall, and then violently hurled him onto the cold stone steps outside the mansion gates. The heavy iron gates slowly swung shut. Liam struggled to his feet, his left arm hanging limp in agony, his clothes covered in dust and dirt. Above him, fireworks continued to explode, briefly illuminating his face. Liam did not cry. He looked up at the study window where Richard stood looking down, raising his glass in a mocking farewell. In that moment, there was no fear in Liam's eyes, the fear of an abandoned child. It was the gaze of a camera recording everything. He memorized every line on Richard's triumphant face, memorized the pain in his arm, and memorized the humiliation of this night. Liam turned his back and walked into the darkness, leaving the brightly lit mansion behind. The seed of hatred had been planted, and from this night on, it would begin to accumulate interest. 20 years had passed since that night of fireworks filling the sky. New York in 2024 was still loud and glamorous, but the balance of hidden power had begun to shift, even though the surface showed no ripples. Richard Dune, now 65 years old, stood at the peak of fame and influence. The blades of a Sikorsky helicopter sliced through the air as it landed on the rooftop of the towering Dune Capitol building in the heart of Wall Street. Richard stepped out, his custom-tailored London suit hugging a body kept in prime condition by expensive stem cell treatments. In his assistant's hands was the latest issue of Forbes, released that very morning. Richard's face dominated the cover, wearing a falsely gentle smile beneath a bold gold headline. Richard Dune, a family man, from philanthropist to billionaire. The world saw Richard as a symbol of the American dream. He appeared frequently on television, preaching about business ethics and compassion. He lived in luxury, traveled between estates by private helicopter, and hosted flashy charity galas to polish his public image. No one knew, or rather, no one dared to remember, that the powerful Dune capital empire had been built entirely on the stolen inheritance of his late wife. Richard believed the past had been buried under layers of money. In complete contrast to Richard's noise and extravagance was the eerie silence of a penthouse in Tribeca. The apartment spanned over 500 square meters, yet felt strangely empty. There were no Italian leather sofas, no million-dollar artworks, no parties. The interior followed an extreme minimalist style, cold, sharp, and unforgiving, just like its owner. Liam Costa, now a 38-year-old man, sat alone in the vast space. He was a ghost on Wall Street. No one in the financial world knew his face. They only whispered about a terrifying set of two initials, LC, a ruthless activist investor. LC was likened to the grim reaper of corrupt companies. Wherever he set his sights, fraud would be exposed, stock prices would collapse, and executives would go to prison. In that cold apartment, the only element that carried human warmth was a white wall facing the desk. Hanging on it was a single old black and white photograph, Maria Costa, smiling gently. It was the only possession Liam had managed to keep from the fateful night when he was 18. Liam looked at his mother's photo, then turned to a system of 6 computer monitors running complex lines of code and tangled financial charts. On the central screen, the file labeled Dune Capital was flashing. There was no longer the impulsive rage of youth, only the terrifying calm of a hunter who'd endured 2 decades of hardship, patiently waiting for the fattest gray to step into the trap. Under the flashing lights of the media, Richard Dune was a solid monument. But once the office doors closed, that monument began to crack from within. Inside a secret private clinic for the ultra-wealthy on the Upper East Side, a heavy atmosphere filled the room. Richard sat on the hospital bed, his face sallow and sickly, completely unlike the carefully made-up glow seen in magazines. His personal doctor, Dr. Harris, placed the test results on the table, his expression grave. "Richard, I can't hide it from you anymore. Your kidneys have reached end-stage failure. Your indulgent lifestyle over the past 20 years has completely destroyed your filtration system." Richard hissed, clutching his aching lower back. "Then replace them. I have money. Buy a kidney on the black market. Do whatever it takes. Just make it fast." "The problem isn't money." Dr. Harris shook his head, adjusting his glasses. "You have an extremely rare blood type and antigen profile. The cross-match compatibility rate is 1 in a million. If we transplant randomly, your body will reject it immediately, and you'll die on the operating table. We need a closely related blood donor, or a miracle." Leaving the clinic with a death sentence hanging over his head, Richard returned to Dune Capital headquarters only to face another nightmare. His chief financial officer was already drenched in sweat. "Sir, we've received inside information. The IRS has started sniffing around our overseas transfers," the chief financial officer whispered, his voice shaking. "They're preparing a full audit next quarter." Richard's face went pale. No one knew better than him that Dune Capital's glamour was just a facade. He had secretly siphoned funds to cover gambling losses and his extravagant lifestyle. The books were now short by a massive amount, 100 million USD. If the IRS stormed in now and discovered that financial black hole, Richard would not only lose everything, he would go to prison. He needed $100 million in clean cash immediately to plug the gap before the auditors came knocking. Physically failing and financially drained, Richard Dune was like a wounded beast driven into a corner. He desperately longed for a miracle or a gift falling from the sky to save him, and he had no idea that this miracle had already been carefully prepared by Liam, waiting patiently for him to take the bait. While Richard Dune was sitting on pins and needles, desperately scrambling to juggle cash flow to silence the IRS, a ray of hope suddenly appeared, brilliant, seductive, and reeking of death. Inside the executive boardroom of Dune Capital, New York's top real estate broker walked in with an eager expression, placing a luxurious leather-bound dossier on the table, embossed with a logo of stylized angel wings. "Mr. Dune," the broker said excitedly, "this is the best news of the year. A mysterious venture capital fund called Archangel Ventures has just reached out. They've expressed a very special interest in purchasing this headquarters building of ours." Richard frowned, rubbing his temples in exhaustion, his voice irritated. "I don't have time for trivial nonsense. I'm not selling the headquarters. This is the face of Dune Capital. It's my symbol of power." "Please, sir, just take a look at the price first." The broker gently slid the offer document across the mahogany table until it stopped directly in front of Richard. "They're offering to buy the entire tower at 20% above market value, and most importantly, full cash payment, paid in one lump sum the moment the contract is signed." Richard snatched the paper. His aged, clouded eyes suddenly lit up as if he were staring at pure gold. The bold number printed on the document was truly unbelievable. With that 20% premium combined with the building's base value, Richard would not only be able to immediately cover the 100 million USD deficit, but would still have plenty left over to continue his lavish lifestyle. Archangel Ventures. Who the hell are they to throw money out the window like this? Richard asked, a flicker of suspicion surfacing before being quickly devoured by greed. "A low-profile foreign investment fund, sir," the broker replied. "Their representative said the feng shui of this building is extremely auspicious, sitting right on the dragon vein of Wall Street, perfectly aligned with their expansion strategy. They want to close the deal with lightning speed within 48 hours. Richard leaned back in his chair and burst in raspy laughter. The hoarse sound rattled in his weakening chest. He thought to himself, "God really is on my side. Just when I need money the most, a bunch of idiots deliver it straight to my mouth." In Richard's eyes, Archangel Ventures were nothing more than newly rich fools, loaded with cash but short on brains, fat little lambs ready to be slaughtered. He had no idea that Archangel, the Archangel Michael in the Bible, is the one who wields the sword to punish evil, and the man standing behind it was watching him from the shadows. "Sell it!" Richard slammed his hand on the table, his eyes flashing with triumph. "Call my lawyer immediately. Tell them to bring the contract here. I'll sign it tomorrow." The big fish had taken the bait, swallowing both hook and line, still believing it had just stumbled into a grand feast. The next morning, in the VIP conference room of Dune Capital, the atmosphere was taut like a drawn wire, not because of heated debate, but because of the terrifying silence of hidden calculations. The representative of Archangel Ventures was not a loud entourage, but a single young male lawyer, his face cold as ice, who placed a thick stack of exactly 500 pages of documents onto the table. The sound of paper hitting wood landed with a heavy thud. "Mr. Dune," the young lawyer said in a flat, emotionless voice, "this is the purchase agreement. As agreed, cash will be transferred immediately once the signatures are dry. However, since we are purchasing at 20% above market value, Archangel requires a special guarantee." Richard, his hands trembling from kidney pain, impatiently tapped his fingers on the tabletop. "Stop beating around the bush. What do you want?" "The indemnity clause, section 12, page 402. The content is very simple. If the seller is found to have committed any fraud regarding the origin of the assets or past financial law violations that affect the reputation of the building, the buyer has the unilateral right to terminate the transaction and confiscate the collateral to compensate for damages." "What is the collateral?" Richard's personal lawyer asked, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "The Costa estate in the Hamptons," the Archangel representative replied curtly. "We require a property of equivalent value as assurance." Richard's lawyer leaned in and whispered a warning. "Sir, this clause is extremely risky. That estate is—" "Shut up!" Richard snapped, waving him off. In his mind, there was only the image of 100 million USD in clean cash waiting to save him from the IRS and pay for a kidney transplant. He thought about the past. 20 years had passed. Maria was dead. Liam had vanished. All evidence of his asset seizure back then had either been destroyed or had exceeded the statute of limitations. He believed he was clean. "I've been running this company for 20 years. No ghost has ever found a single mistake," Richard sneered as he picked up his gold-plated Parker fountain pen. He looked at the young lawyer with defiance. "Fine. If you want that old house so badly, sign it." The pen glided swiftly across the paper, leaving behind Richard Dune's flamboyant signature. The moment he set the pen down, the soft click of the briefcase snapping shut echoed like the sound of a prison cell locking. Richard let out a long breath, thinking he had escaped disaster. He had no idea that the signature was not a key to a treasure chest, but the first shovel he had used to dig his own grave. This contract did not buy a building. It bought justice for the past. The ink on the property sale contract had not even fully dried when fate delivered its next blow. The surge of excitement from believing he had escaped his debt sent his blood pressure soaring, pushing his already failing kidneys into complete shutdown. Richard collapsed in the elevator lobby of Dune Capital and was rushed straight into the special emergency unit of Mount Sinai Hospital. He woke to the steady beep, beep of a dialysis machine, feeling as fragile as a candle flickering in the wind. Dr. Harris delivered the bad news. His body had begun reacting negatively to dialysis. He needed a kidney transplant within 72 hours, or he should prepare for death. We've identified the only person with potential cross-compatibility through maternal genetics, Richard's personal lawyer whispered, placing a secretly taken photograph on the hospital bed. It's Liam Costa. He's living in Manhattan. Richard stared at the image of the scrawny, illegitimate son from years ago, now a fully grown man with sharp, icy eyes. There was no remorse in his mind, no trace of pottenly affection, only a cold commercial calculation. That kid must be struggling. Everyone needs money. "Give me the phone," Richard rasped. He gathered what little strength he had left to perform the role of a repentant father. On the other end of the line, the phone rang for a long time before someone finally answered. Silence filled the space. "Liam, it's your father," Richard forced his voice to sound pitiful and shaky. "Son, I'm in the hospital. I'm dying." The other end remained silent, broken only by slow, steady breathing, cold and detached. Richard continued, striking at the psychological weak spot he believed would work best. "I know I was wrong, but for your mother in heaven wouldn't want to see me die like this. Come save me. I'll give you $1 million, cash, immediately." Inside the cold penthouse, Liam held the phone, his eyes fixed on his mother's photograph on the wall. He felt no softness. On the contrary, the corner of his mouth curled into a contemptuous smile. The old wolf was begging the lamb he once cast out. $1 million for a kidney? Liam said calmly, chillingly so. Is that how cheaply you value your own life? $2 million or $5 million, any price you want, Richard screamed in desperation. Liam paused for 1 second, his voice sharpened like a razor blade, slicing through all remaining hope. "You've got the wrong number. I don't have a father." Click. The endless dial tone echoed through the hospital room. Richard went numb as the phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor. He couldn't believe he had just been rejected. He roared in pain and fury, but no one answered. He realized then money could buy buildings, but it could not buy life from the man he had planted hatred in. Richard Dune had not yet swallowed the humiliation of being rejected when the real storm struck. On Monday morning, as Richard lay undergoing dialysis, the television mounted on the hospital wall suddenly flashed the words "Breaking News" in blazing red. Bloomberg aired the urgent report: large-scale financial fraud suspected at Dune Capital. IRS and SEC launched joint investigation. It turned out that the $100 million USD Richard so desperately sought from the building sale never even had a chance to reach his account before being frozen. A thick, anonymous dossier containing complete evidence of Richard's embezzlement, tax evasion, and money laundering over the past 10 years had been sent simultaneously to every major newsroom in New York. The sender left no trace, but the accuracy of the documents was absolute. Wall Street was shaken. Dune Capital stock price plummeted uncontrollably. Within just 2 hours of the market opening, 40% of the company's market capitalization evaporated like mist under sunlight. Investors panicked and dumped shares, while the phones of Richard and the executive board buzzed nonstop until their batteries died. Just as Richard was screaming at a nurse to turn off the television, his lawyer rushed in, breathless, his face drained of all color. "Mr. Dune, we're in serious trouble. Archangel Ventures, they've just issued a legal notice." "What do they want? To cancel the contract?" Richard hissed. Worse, they've activated the indemnity clause. Because you're under investigation for financial fraud, violating your commitment regarding clean asset origins, Archangel has declared immediate seizure of the collateral. What? Richard's eyes bulged. The Hamptons estate? Yes, they've already sent people to change the gate locks and seal the property. We've lost the house. A heart attack slammed into him, sending the heart monitor into a piercing alarm. But the survival instinct of an old fox surged stronger than ever. Richard ripped the IV line, grabbed his lawyer by the collar, his eyes blazing wildly. Sue them into the ground. I signed that contract while mentally unfit during a medical emergency. They tricked me. I'm the victim. Richard decided to gamble everything. He would drag Archangel into court, use the media to play the role of a sick old man whose house was stolen by predatory sharks. He believed public opinion would side with the weaker party. He did not know that going to court was exactly what Liam wanted most. The stage had been fully set for the final act. The civil lawsuit between Richard Dune and Archangel Ventures became the focal point of New York media. Outside the Manhattan Supreme Court, hundreds of reporters crowded together, cameras aimed straight at the wheelchair-accessible entrance. Richard Dune appeared exactly according to the script he had carefully staged. He sat in a wheelchair, an oxygen tube fitted into his nose, a thin blanket draped loosely over his withered legs. The most expensive legal team in the city surrounded him like bodyguards. Before the jury, Richard was no longer the old Wall Street fox, but a sick, pitiful old man deceived at the edge of death by cold-blooded business predators. "Your Honor," Richard's lawyer began in a powerful, sorrow-laden voice, "my client, a man fighting for his life second by second, was coerced into signing this devil's contract while in delirious state. Archangel Ventures are not investors. They are vultures circling a dying body." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the courtroom. Richard lowered his head, dabbed the corner of his eyes with a handkerchief, performing the role of the victim flawlessly. "Defense counsel, where is the representative of Archangel Ventures?" The judge struck the gavel, his stern voice echoing. The heavy oak door at the back of the courtroom slowly opened. The room fell instantly silent. A man stepped inside. Not the young lawyer from before, but a man around 38 years old, composed and commanding, exuding cold authority in a charcoal gray custom-tailored suit. He walked forward with confidence, the sound of his leather shoes striking the wooden floor solid and deliberate, in stark contrast to Richard's frailty. The man walked straight to the witness stand, not sparing a glance at anyone else, his eyes locked firmly on Richard Dune. "I am the representative and the sole owner of Archangel Ventures." His voice was low, steady, yet carried throughout the courtroom. "My name is Liam Costa." The name Costa hit Richard like a bucket of ice water. He jerked his head up, gripping the arms of his wheelchair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The oxygen tube nearly slipped from his nose. Richard's cloudy eyes collided with Liam's razor-sharp gaze. In that instant, time seemed to freeze. He recognized the child he had thrown onto the street under fireworks years ago, the bastard son he had despised, now standing there tall, composed, and holding the fate of the empire Richard had built. Liam gave Richard a slight nod, a polite, formal gesture, yet one loaded with terrifying menace. "Hello, stepfather. The game has only just begun." The shock of seeing Liam momentarily stunned Richard, but his cunning survival instinct quickly resurfaced. He signaled to his lead attorney, his eyes flashing with a poisonous gleam. He had prepared for this day long ago, a filthy trump card reserved in case his illegitimate son ever returned to claim his rights. "Your Honor," Richard's lawyer stood, holding a carefully sealed envelope. "Mr. Liam Costa's appearance today is nothing more than a performance driven by personal gain. We have evidence proving that the father-son relationship was completely severed, legally and financially, 20 years ago." The lawyer pulled out a document yellowed with age and solemnly presented it to the jury. "This is a waiver of inheritance rights dated July 5, 2004, immediately after Mrs. Maria's death. In this document, Liam Costa voluntarily signed to receive a cash payment of $50,000 from Mr. Richard Dune. In exchange, he agreed to relinquish all rights related to the family assets and leave New York permanently." The courtroom erupted in gasps. Reporters scrambled to photograph the document projected onto the large screen. The old typewritten text was clearly visible, and at the bottom was the signature, Liam Costa, in blue ink, the immature handwriting of an 18-year-old. "Look at this," Richard's lawyer raised his voice, pointing at Liam. "He is not a victim. He is greedy. Back then, he took the money and ran off to live it up. Now, seeing Mr. Dune sick and wealthy, he returns under the guise of an investor to mine more money. This is blatant extortion." Richard sat in his wheelchair, glancing sideways at Liam, a triumphant smirk curling on his lips. He believed this document was the most perfect forgery he had ever commissioned. Who could verify something from 20 years ago? With this paper, Liam would transform from a man seeking justice into an ungrateful, money-hungry son in the public eye. The public began to murmur, suspicious gazes turning toward Liam. The wind seemed to be shifting. But contrary to Richard's glee, Liam remained seated calmly at the plaintiff's table. He did not object, did not get angry, and showed no sign of confusion. He looked at the forged document the way one looks at a cheap toy. His composure caused the smile on Richard's face to stiffen. A chill suddenly ran down Richard's spine, as if he had just stepped into an even larger trap. That day's hearing ended amid the chaos of flashing cameras and loud speculation. Richard Dunn, left like a martyr, pushed in his wheelchair by nurses through a swarm of waiting reporters. He bowed his head, wiped away tears, fully playing the role of an elderly father driven to the edge by an ungrateful son. Over the next 72 hours, Richard's dirty media machine ran at full capacity. New York tabloids raced to publish shocking headlines. "The gold digger returns from the shadows." "The truth about Liam Costa, selling family for $50,000. On television talk shows, hired experts analyzed Liam's behavior, branding him with labels of personality disorder, greed, and emotional coldness. The American public, easily swayed by tragic family narratives, began turning against Liam, cursing him. They called him a social climber, a vulture feeding on a dying body. Faced with that terrifying storm of public opinion, Liam's reaction was the most baffling of all. He remained completely silent. Liam held no press conference to fight back. He issued no press release denying the forged document. Archangel's lawyers shut their office doors tight. The silence stretched for 3 days, heavy and suffocating like the sky before a major storm. Richard Dunn, though victorious in the headlines, felt deeply uneasy lying in his hospital bed. Why wasn't Liam struggling? Why wasn't he shouting that the document was fake? He feared Liam's silence more than any threat. On Thursday morning, one day before the final hearing, reporters ambushed Liam as he stepped out of the Archangel building. Dozens of microphones were thrust toward him like spears. "Mr. Costa, do you have anything to say about the accusation that you took money and walked away years ago? Aren't you ashamed to claim assets from a dying stepfather?" Liam stopped. He adjusted his suit collar, his eyes sweeping over the noisy crowd with a calm that silenced them instantly. They waited for a weak explanation. But Liam did not explain. He looked straight into the live broadcast camera, his voice deep and resonant. "I will say nothing. Wait until Friday, the exact 20th anniversary of my mother's death." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the crowd stunned. Liam's promise sounded like a declaration of war, signaling that tomorrow in that courtroom what would be revealed would not merely be evidence, but the final judgment of fate. Friday morning, exactly the 20th anniversary of Maria Costa's death. Outside the courthouse, rain poured down in sheets as if washing away the city's grime. But inside, courtroom number 7, the air was hot, heavy, and suffocating. On the defense side, Richard Dune sat in his wheelchair, his triumphant expression barely concealed beneath the mask of illness. His legal team had just finished a brilliant closing argument, painting Liam as a shameless extortionist based on the forged renunciation of inheritance document. The jury seemed convinced. The judge struck the gavel and looked toward Liam. "Your Honor?" Liam's voice rang out, calm and authoritative. "I do not need to defend my character. Truth does not need defending. It only needs to be heard. I call my final witness, Mr. Arthur Sterling." The name hit Richard Dune like an electric shock. He jerked his head toward the door, eyes wide with terror. Arthur Sterling? Impossible. That was the old, stubborn lawyer who had drafted Maria's will years ago. Richard had convinced himself the man had either been died, forgotten somewhere, or been intimidated to vanish from New York forever 20 years earlier. Why was he here? The large courtroom doors slowly opened. An elderly man, around 80, his hair white as cotton. He leaned on an ebony cane, walking slowly, yet his back remained perfectly straight, radiating the dignity of an old guardian of justice. 2 court officers escorted him. But what drained the color from Richard Dune's face was not Arthur's presence. It was what the old man clutched tightly to his chest with both hands, a thick, aged file bound with twine and sealed with bright red wax bearing the Costa family crest, the original seal, untouched, unbroken. Arthur stepped up to the witness stand and placed the file on the wooden surface. The dull thud echoed through the deadly silence. He removed his glasses, stared directly at Richard Dune, trembling in his wheelchair, and spoke clearly. "I kept my promise to Maria Costa. I waited exactly 20 years until Liam was old enough and strong enough to open this box." Liam turned to Richard, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Did you really think you had won? The real performance is only beginning." The courtroom was utterly silent, broken only by the sound of Arthur Sterling tearing through the aged seal. The ripping tapers screeched like a curtain being torn away from a secret hidden for 20 years. Liam picked up the renunciation of inheritance document presented by Richard's side and walked slowly toward the jury. "Mr. Richard," Liam turned back, his voice cold and sharp, "you forged this very carefully, but you forgot one basic anatomical detail. In 2004, I was left-handed." He raised the document high. "The hook of this signature slants to the right, a hallmark of a right-handed writer, but more importantly," Liam pulled an old yellowed medical record from his file. "On the night of July 4th, 2004, the exact date written here, I was lying unconscious in the emergency room of Hamptons County Hospital. Why? Because your security guards broke my left arm when they threw me out of the house. How could a man in a coma with his dominant arm shattered sign this document?" The courtroom erupted in shock. The judge frowned, staring hard at Richard. The forged evidence collapsed instantly. Richard's face turned ashen, sweat pouring down his body. Without giving Richard a moment to breathe, Arthur Sterling began reading Maria Costa's true will aloud. His old voice trembled, yet remained firm. Clause 7, Section B. If Richard Dune remarries or forcibly removes Liam Costa from the residence, he shall immediately lose his status as trustee and be reduced to a constructive trustee. Richard's lawyer jumped up. Objection! What does that even mean? Liam stepped forward, answering in place of the judge, his voice ringing through the room. It means that under U.S. law, a constructive trustee has no right to any profits derived from the principal asset. Every dollar you earned using my mother's money over the past 20 years, including founding Dune Capital, buying supercars and mansions, was never legally yours. You were merely holding it for me. Liam tossed a stack of financial reports onto Richard's lap. I did the math for you. Principal plus an 8% annual penalty interest for misappropriation over 20 years. Not only do you lose Dune Capital, you owe me a total of $320 million. You are bankrupt, Richard. The judge's gavel came down like a thunderclap. Richard slumped in his wheelchair, mouth hanging open, unable to speak. The empire he had built with pride evaporated in an instant, turning him into a massive debtor to the man he despised. The shock was too great. Richard suffered a violent heart attack. He clutched his chest and fell from his wheelchair onto the cold floor. Chaos erupted as people shouted for medical help. In his final moments, Richard looked up and saw Liam standing over him. Richard trembled as he grabbed the hem of Liam's pant leg, his voice weak and desperate. Liam, no matter what, I'm still your stepfather. I'm dying. Save me. You're the only one. Blood type. The courtroom held its breath, witnessing this moment of raw humanity. Liam bent down, leaned close to Richard's ear, close enough for the microphone on his collar to capture the chilling whisper. You're right. I'm the only person in the world whose kidney is compatible with yours. I could save you. Hope flickered in Richard's eyes. But I won't, Liam said coldly, merciless as a blade. Because my mother taught me, never invest in an asset that's already rotten. Take your failing kidney and your sins to hell with you. Liam straightened up, brushing off his sleeve as if he had touched something filthy. Richard stared at him, hope extinguished, replaced by absolute despair. He let out a broken scream and collapsed unconscious in the arms of the paramedics. Police sirens wailed, slicing through the stillness after the verdict. Richard Dune was not taken back to his luxurious mansion. He was handcuffed directly on the stretcher. Charged with forgery, tax evasion, and asset misappropriation, his final destination was the prison hospital at the notorious Rikers Island. There, in a cramped room reeking of cheap disinfectant, Richard lay alone. No private doctors, no fine wine, no hollow praise. Beside him, an old dialysis machine rattled, buzz, buzz, keeping a ruined body barely alive. He stared at the peeling ceiling and realized that the wealth he had spent his life hoarding could no longer buy him a single night of peaceful sleep. The greatest punishment was not death, but being forced to live, forgotten and broke. Outside the Supreme Court, the summer rain had completely stopped. The New York sky after the storm was clear and vast. Golden sunlight filtered through the leaves, illuminating the wet stone steps. Liam Costa stepped out of the courthouse. He took a deep breath, feeling the pure taste of freedom fill his lungs. The burden of hatred he had carried for 20 years dissolved light as air. He did not keep the $320 million for himself. That very afternoon, Liam signed the decision to establish the Maria Costa Foundation. In Hamptons, the iron gates that had once slammed shut in the face of an 18-year-old Liam now stood wide open. The gaudy gold-plated sign reading Dune Estate was torn down and thrown into scrap. In its place stood a simple, elegant wooden sign, Maria Legal Aid Center, protecting women and children deprived of their inheritance rights. The house that once symbolized greed and betrayal became a fortress of justice and compassion. In the quiet parking lot, Liam walked toward his car, not a flashy supercar, but an old 1967 Ford Mustang, the last birthday gift his mother ever gave him, the car he had spent countless sleepless nights restoring bolt by bolt with his own hands. Liam started the engine. The roar was powerful, full of life. He put on his sunglasses and glanced once more into the rearview mirror. The Dune skyscraper shrank, then vanished. Liam smiled, a real, unburdened smile. He was not rich because of the money he won, but because he had reclaimed his mother's honor and his own identity. The car sped forward, merging into the endless flow of New York, headed straight toward the setting sun.